He got knocked off. Guys, what's up? Welcome to the Cast, where we talk about horror movies and horror streaming shows. Just like last week, I go start this recording with Danny, and then he disappears. But there he is. He's back. What's up, Mister Torkel? Okay, now I can't hear him. Uh-oh. Let's see if you're on mute or something. You're not muted. Uh-oh. You gotta sign there. Okay, now you're back. Nice and awkward. There we go. Now I can hear you.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
So this is last week. The second you started recording, it kicked me out and I had to open Streamlabs to an app. This time, the second you press record, it says unsupported by browser. And then I guess you had to let me back in. I don't know.
That's fucking annoying. And it's StreamYard. Remember, there's always commercials for this on every fucking YouTube
what
video
did I call
watch.
It?
Streamlabs. Oh, dude, who cares? Yeah.
But
no, seriously, every time I watch a YouTube video, there's a commercial for them. And I'm like, I already used them. I don't need any more. Today, we are here to talk about Godzilla X Kong, the new empire. If you didn't know, there's a new empire around with a lot of monkeys. And Danny...
It's funny that you botched the title, because I think the title of this movie is obnoxious in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to say it. Are we supposed to say Godzilla X Kong?
Yeah.
Why isn't it just Godzilla and Kong?
Yeah.
Or Godzilla plus Kong.
Dude, I don't know. And I mean, it just kind of reminds me of Batman v Superman, right? And it's funny because it's called Godzilla X Kong, but Godzilla is barely in this movie.
Absolutely. Which I think worked a little bit to its advantage.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Godzilla is basically, he's portrayed as an animal, whereas Kong is portrayed more, I know this is weird, but with human characteristics.
Right.
He's a giant ape. He communicates with the little girl. He, we can understand King Kong's emotions, whereas Godzilla is a giant radioactive lizard, and it's hard to identify with him, even though I did want to cuddle with him inside the Coliseum.
Who doesn't, man? I mean, he went there a couple of times in this movie. I mean, that's pretty amazing image. The audience, which, by the way, when I saw this, it was like a packed house, and the audience really laughed when they saw him snuggle in there.
So that's interesting, because I saw this on a Thursday night. I left for the airport at 3:45 a.m. New York time. I saw this at I think 9 o'clock or maybe 8 o'clock Thursday night. And it was one of the larger theaters, and it wasn't that sold out. I would say about maybe 40 to 50 people in the top section of the theater. So I was wondering if this movie was going to do well. I look at the last two Godzilla movies. They were not super successful. King of the Monsters cost $200 million and actually lost money in the United States. It was a success worldwide.
Yeah.
It grossed close to $500 million worldwide.
Yeah.
But in America, it did not make in IMDb breaks it up by US and Canada and then worldwide gross.
Sure.
And Godzilla versus Kong cost less money. It cost 150 or 130 million. I think that's what this movie cost also.
Yeah,
but it didn't gross a lot domestically. It made its money back internationally, worldwide.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to see how this movie does, especially with everything we've been hearing about the film industry being that people don't go to the movies anymore, and with the MCU, even though of course Barbie and Oppenheimer made a combined $2 billion last year. The idea, and I see the recap of the Monsterverse. I know we're going to talk about the whole cinematic universe thing being overdone and maybe time to put it to bed a little bit.
Yes,
but I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see how how much money this movie does make,
Yeah.
and if it justifies keeping this series going.
Yeah. One of my favorite channels is Red Letter Media, and they just recently covered Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, right? I saw Ghostbusters Frozen Empire at a Regal, and I saw this at an Alamo. Now, when I was watching the Red Letter Media video, the guy on there, Mike, was saying that he's seen this study where they were saying that like people 25 and under actually aren't really interested in movies and TV shows, even that they're just much more interested in short form videos. And I mean, I feel like that makes sense when I see all the stuff with like TikTok and stuff like that. When I think about like movies and I think about comics and I think about books, I think that you have people that like it is their passion, like me or you or Brian. And so we're always going to go and like seek things out. We're going to go to the theater for movies. We're going to like buy books. We're going to buy comics. I think like that general audience where it's like not necessarily their passion, they're not going to the theaters. And I think the thing that proves that point, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but like I saw this movie in the Alamo Drafthouse, I saw Dune in the Alamo Drafthouse, and both of those were completely packed. But then I saw Ghostbusters, I saw Madam Web in the Regal, and they were completely empty of people.
So to compare that to New York for a second, I think that you have two different categories of of theater goers.
Yeah.
I think you have your general cineplexes like your Regals and your AMCs, which cater to the general public.
Right.
And I think it's a combination of things. You're dead on. Like we both have kids that are like teenagers, and we see their viewing habits, and we see what high school kids view. I mean, Millie Bobby Brown, she's gotten a lot of heat this week because she came out and said that she doesn't watch movies, even her own movies. And like somebody tweeted like, well, then why are you even an actress? And I'm like, well, I don't necessarily buy into that. And I'm not even like mad at her for what she said, but I think she's a young star. She's in her early 20s. And even though she's an incredibly successful actress who's made some films, a lot of Netflix films, I still want to see Damsel, but she made all the Stranger Things shows, and it's interesting to hear somebody her age basically say, "I don't watch movies," and I think a lot of people who are her fans, like our kids, that like Charlotte watches movies. But it's typically because I say, "Do you want to watch a movie?"
Right.
If left to her own devices, she'll watch episodes of Supernatural or whatever show she's streaming with Athena, or she's on her phone watching TikToks, YouTube, and things like that. And we both. I work in a high school. I see that all the time with high school kids. They don't care about the idea of sitting for a 2 to 2.5 hour movie. To them, is like torturous, no matter how. But then you go to Alamo Drafthouse or a Nighthawk Cinema or a more niche theater like that has the whole dine-in experience, and it's more of an adult themed. We're not going to sit and talk during the movie. We're not going to sit on our phones and play our games because we're bored. Those theaters do very well. There are 3 Alamo Drafthouses in New York City. The only one that I know doesn't really do well is the Staten Island one. And I think that's more of its location than anything else. There's 2 Nighthawk Cinemas in Brooklyn, one in Park Slope, one in Williamsburg. They both do very well. They get, guests, and they do like events and screenings all the time. And even though I have Regal Unlimited, and for a convenience factor, the theater's 5 minutes from my house, I love going. There is something special though about going to those more niche, like more artsy, I guess, theaters like the Nighthawks and the Alamos. And they cater to a different class of film goer. And I think that, movies like this, I'm actually kind of interested that this movie did really well in an Alamo, because this doesn't feel like a really Alamo type movie. This feels like a more like, I've seen a lot of the positive reviews of this movie be like, oh, just turn your brain off and go enjoy the popcorn.
Yeah.
bang bang smash smash.
Right.
It reminded me of Movie Bob's review of King of the Monsters, where
Yeah. Yeah.
he
He's
loved
in
it so
love.
much, and he
Yeah.
started the review with it playing with Godzilla figures, and I
Yes.
really and like I'm really happy for those fans who enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
I think this movie showed me that I'm just never going to fully appreciate this world, this universe of movies. There's
Yes.
nothing, because we've talked about this a lot. We covered Monarch. We reviewed a bunch of these movies. We've talked about them a lot.
Yeah.
I've not loved a single one of them. I've
Right.
liked a lot of parts of them, but I have
Yeah.
not loved a single one of these movies,
Yeah.
which continues to baffle me as somebody who grew up renting Godzilla movies from like the
Yeah.
60s and 70s.
Yeah. Well,
And
I'm really glad you brought that up, because one thing I think maybe I'm worried it causes like some tension between like you and me, or me and Brian, or even me and Mike Bongiorno, is that I often find that I'm the one that's like the most critical of things that everybody likes the most. And it's funny because like when I go to the movies, I recorded a review with Mike Bongiorno yesterday about Superman the movie, right? And he brings up Francis Ford Coppola's quote about how like all the movie needs is 7 really great scenes, right? And for me, I mean, you've heard me say this shit over and over again, where it's like when they really can like sync up the music, the dialogue, and what you're seeing on screen, you can create these magic moments. And I keep seeing these movies like Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire. I see this, and like it just doesn't have that kind of magic moment. There is one magic moment in this movie
I
that I
might
was
have
like,
slept through it.
you might have. You very well might have. I mean, we're going to kind of jump around, I think, during this review, but I have to mention this one part. It's where Kong has had his like root canal, and he's about to jump back into the underground world, or whatever the fuck it's called. What's it called? They always
Hollow
talk
Earth.
about it in Monarch.
Hollow
What?
Earth.
Hollow Earth. Thank you so much. Thank you. And like they have these like spires that come out of the ocean, and they kind of like light up, and there's a whirlpool that starts to form, and Kong gets up and he kind of shrugs his shoulders, and then they start playing that song, "Am I Stranded in the Twilight Zone?" Right? And like that felt like a genuine, exciting moment. I was like, "Oh, this is cool," and it's the moment that I would want to go see if I saw this movie again. But then the rest of these movies, it's just kind of like this paint by numbers, where it's like, okay, all right, this is going to happen here. This is going to happen here. I'm not going to say that I dislike this movie, but so often with these kind of movies, I always feel like they're like 70s on tests, or like 65s or 70s. It's
So
not this. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I want to make this full disclosure. We've joked about this. I legitimately did fall asleep in the second half of this movie. I think I missed almost the entire final fight scene, which
Oh
is
my God. Yeah.
hilarious. That I
Yeah.
fell asleep in the movie theater during a Godzilla Kong movie and missed the fight. I stayed awake through all the first hour of boring shit. Uh, but I felt, and I think so. I didn't like what I saw,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm also fully aware that I can't like fully judge this movie.
Sure.
But what I want to do is like the next time I go to Regal, I want to like strategize that I'm going to a movie. I could get to that movie like an hour early and like
Yeah.
sneak back into this and see
Nice.
like the fight. I
Yes.
saw how it ends. I saw like which was the obvious thing the minute like
Right.
they
Right.
introduced the characters. I was
Right.
like, oh well, that's how it's going to end, of
Right.
course. So
Right.
I saw that.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't. So I just think that that's telling. That
Yeah. But well,
and
so let's talk about the people behind these movies, right? Because I think that this is
okay,
actually really interesting, right? Because like you said, these movies are kind of mediocre. You don't really love any of these, but the talent behind them are really interesting. Like this one is directed by Adam Wingard, and he has one of his alum in this movie. He has Dan Stevens, because he worked with Dan Stevens
I
in
guess.
The Guest, right? And Adam Wingard, his career, I actually haven't seen a lot of his stuff. I'm assuming that you have, but he did like
Yeah.
Blair Witch. He did Death Note, which is like the Netflix movie adaptation of Death Note, right? What do you call it? The people behind the movie, the ones that wrote it, not these guys. Here we go. Like Do you know anything about any of these writers?
Well, Simon Barrett and Adam Wingard I believe they were part of a group with Ty West called like the Mumblegore, and
Mm-hmm.
they really, I thought they were going to be like the future of horror about a decade ago, because
Right.
they worked on, I think, the VHS movies, and then they did You're Next.
Right.
Adam Wingard did The Guest, and I think like they either like co-write or act in or like produce and direct each other's stuff. And all I could think of while I was watching this and thinking back to Godzilla versus Kong, which Wingard directed also, was, man, what I wouldn't give for Adam Wingard to go back and make a very small scale horror movie again. Because I
Mm-hmm.
love Your Next. I
Mm-hmm.
loved The Guest. And I don't love these movies. Uh, and I felt that way watching the acting too. Like
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Brian Tyree, what's, oh god, I don't have, what is his name? Brian Tyree.
Oh yeah,
What's his
yeah,
last
yeah, yeah.
name?
I'm
Uh,
sorry, I gotta look him up too. Yeah, yeah.
he's an Oscar nominated actor now. He actually got nominated for Best Supporting Actor like in 2023, I believe.
Right.
And like Rebecca
He's-
Hall is somebody who we have showered praise upon with her performance in what is it, Resurrection,
yes.
and she's been an actress that I've really loved. The Night, what was the Night House, the Night,
The Night
the
House,
Night,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Like Rebecca Hall, she says, "Oh my God," a lot. Like you have these great actors in this movie.
Yeah.
Dan Stevens, The
Yes.
Guest. Dan Stevens is in this upcoming horror movie called Cuckoo, which I saw the trailer for before Immaculate, and I was like, "Whoa, this movie looks insane!" And Dan Stevens, he's like a chameleon. Like in this movie, he feels like, oh, he's the hot leading man, but then in like other movies, he's like the yeah, he does feel like he's like the really hot. Yeah, he is basically Owen from the Jurassic World movies.
Mixed with
Uh,
Star-Lord though.
yes, where he's like, "Oh, hey, hot female,
Yeah.
like we have a past, and we're gonna do it again as soon as this movie's over. But first, let's go save the giant creatures. Look at my
Yes.
smile."
Right.
And
Yeah.
you have these three great actors who I just, and maybe this is me just being like an asshole, but like I felt like, man, I really wish I was watching these three actors and this
Something else.
director do something else. I wish I was watching an Adam Wingard small scale horror movie. I wish
Yeah.
I was watching Rebecca Hall like kill it like she did in Resurrection and The Night House. I wish I was watching like Oscar caliber stuff from these tremendous talents, and instead I'm watching them react to like green screen while special effects are smashing into each other around them.
Yes.
This movie starts, and for about the first 10 minutes of the movie,
Yeah.
it's just Kong in Hollow Earth.
Yes.
And I swear to God, at that moment, I went to myself, that's what this should be.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
should be a humanless movie.
Right.
It should just be 90 minutes of Kong in Hollow Earth
Right.
finding that, underground lair where Scar King is,
Right.
and then Kong going up to like an injured Kong going up to recruit Godzilla down as like, to use a wrestling reference, Godzilla shows up where it's like Kong's being beaten down, and then all of a sudden you hear Stone Cold Steve Austin's music hit. The crowd goes wild, and
Yeah.
Godzilla comes in with a steel chair to save the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like it could be like beating up Kong, and then all of a sudden you hear, and in comes Godzilla.
Yes.
That no humans. That to me would have been so much more interesting and so much better, because this first hour of this movie was so much about exposition for, like, they see the bloody handprint, and I felt like they went into like a long dialogue about like like I'm a history teacher. I didn't need to know a full history lesson about this tribe.
Yeah, the
And
Iwi tribe. Yeah.
and then when they go into that little area and she sees the like the rock formation and she
Yes.
gives a full piece by piece, and then this happened, but then Scar King came, but then Godzilla put him away, and then
Yeah.
and I was like, stop,
Yeah. Yeah.
stop.
Yeah, I mean, these movies are so paint by numbers that like they even have like these same scenes. Like there were actually scenes in this that kind of weirdly mirrored Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Wait a minute, they both have Empire in the fucking title too, right? New
uh,
Empire, Frozen Empire. That you have this ice
Godzilla X
Titan.
Kong, Godzilla X Kong versus Ghostbusters, a new Frozen Empire.
Yeah, yeah. And essentially there's even the same kind of plot point where it's like, oh man, there's this ancient evil that's really powerful. It has an army. It's gonna
Yeah,
come back.
this
You know?
scene of Rebecca Hall pointing at like the
Yeah.
the inscription on the wall is exactly uh I keep forgetting his name, the comedian that I like.
Oh,
Patton Oswald. Patton Oswald
oh yeah.
doing narrating like the cartoon, the animated Garada
Yeah.
history. It's that is the exact same scene. Yeah.
Yeah. Brian Tyree Henry is the guy you were trying to get the last name
Yes.
of before. I was gonna say though that like it's almost like when they make these movies, they're like, we have to have this kind of scene, and this is the part where we have to be creative. And it seems like when they do the exposition dump where it essentially sets up the story, they have to have some kind of cool way of showing it besides just flashbacks. And there's always examples of this, like in Man of Steel, they have that sort of like moving vista that's in the Kryptonian ship. In Wonder Woman, it's like the painting that kind of moves. In Ghostbusters, they have like the stones that kind of move in Frozen Empire. In this, it's really just they just show like paintings on the wall or like carvings on the wall, and Rebecca Hall's talking. So it's not as creative, but they at least are creative enough where while she's explaining this, they're showing Kong go find this gorilla empire with Scar King in it. So it's kind of like it builds up the tension. She's like, "Oh, there's this threat," but then there's Kong actually going and facing it. I mean, you brought up a few really few good points in there. But like what I was going to say about this is that when you see Rebecca Hall and you think about that movie Resurrection, where she gives that one monologue and the girls just sitting there listening to her, then you see this, you really start to think like, oh man, is she like in really bad debt? Like, does she owe somebody something? Because it's like, why is she in this? Like,
I
go ahead.
always think about the scene in Bill and Silent Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back where I think it's that movie where
Yeah.
Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are on the set of Goodwill Hunting 2 hunting season,
Oh my
and they're
god.
like, and Ben Affleck's like, yeah, got to make the art movie. You got to make the big movie so you can make the art movie, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
and then Matt Damon's like, yeah, and sometimes you make forces of nature. It's like you shut the fuck up.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah. It's
I feel like Rebecca Hall is probably at that stage where she wants to make. And again, God bless her. Maybe she loves these movies and maybe she has a ton of fun with them. I I just love her as an actress, and I want to see her acting more than reacting to special effects.
right.
And I feel like this movie is a big budget popcorn entertainment movie, so maybe her and Dan Stevens and Brian Tyree Henry are making really good money, and then they're going to go and do Oscar caliber work. Like Dan Stevens is doing this like super weird horror movie coming out that I can't wait to see, and
Yeah.
maybe she's got more Resurrections and Night Houses in her on her schedule coming up.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that, but also we've seen there have been cases where like low budget like indie darling actors have broken out big into mainstream cinema.
Yeah.
So who knows? It could be both.
It's funny because like basically since like Spider-Man and like the other movies that are in the thousands, like 2001, we've had this transition where certain things were only in comics, in books, in cartoons, and now it's like they can all in live action movies. Like we were never going to have anything like Endgame or anything like that, you know, in the 90s, right? Like it's not even possible. It's not feasible. But now we live in a world where you can essentially make any kind of spectacle. When we had movies like this in the past, it's always the same thing of what you just said, where it was like, okay, let's just have a movie of just Kong, just Godzilla. We don't need the humans. We just need to see the creatures. Like Brian and I, for like 20 years now at this point, have been like, we don't need humans in Transformers movies. Like the Transformers characters are interesting enough.
And they talk.
Right, right. It's always the inverse in Hollywood because like
yeah.
With the Transformers, for example, like they're developed interesting characters in their cartoons and their comics, and in the movies, they're always these like background monsters, and then you focus on these humans, and then they're like, well, the humans have to have some kind of arc because that's the way that stories work. But nobody gives a shit about these human characters. They're paying money.
Freddy versus Jason.
Right.
Alien versus Predator.
Right.
Now, again, I'll defend Alien versus Predator. I like the Sanaa Lathan, like her character and her arc in that movie.
Sure.
But like Freddy versus Jason, every human in that movie, like, that is a detriment to the movie.
Yes.
And like, I get it. You need fodder for the slashers to kill, but it, like in this, in the Godzilla and Kong, they're not hunting humans. They're monsters fighting monsters. So you've created a place, Hollow Earth, that is a monster realm. You literally could have just done this movie in Hollow Earth with not a single like maybe just for fun to establish that like Scar King and Shimu are threats. You know, by the way, it's telling that we're 25, 26 minutes in. That's like one of the first times we've mentioned the villains of this movie. Yeah. Because, you know, like the movie, we waited a long ass fucking time to bring them up.
Correct.
You could have had some monarch labeled military people who just get like stepped on and killed. And you're like, oh my God, these monsters. Or like Shimu comes out and freezes a few humans. Like, oh my God. So that's this monster's power. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then they just go back to fighting each other. And instead we're you know, like I felt like I'm kind of done with Brian Tyree Henry's character. Like I thought he was a little too much in Godzilla versus Kong. Like he doesn't really add much to this movie other than like he's constantly just there narrating his podcast. It's like which allows for a constant stream of exposition. Like Dan Stevens is just like, oh, he's an archetypical character that we've met many times before, as you said.
Yeah.
We didn't need anything. Like I love your thing down there where you said Rebecca Hall says, "Oh my God," a lot.
She does though, like 5 times at least.
Aside from like narrating the history of the Iwi tribe, I don't think she says anything of importance that wasn't in the trailer. Where like I saw the trailer a bunch of times, and I just keep like her going, "That's not Kong," like that. That line is just like embedded now.
Yeah. I mean, this is the reason why these movies kind of just do poorly. Like, my little daughter wanted to go see this movie because she keeps seeing images on TikTok of the baby Kong, right? And I didn't even know this, but the baby's called Suko, okay? So the baby Kong, he's a big part of this movie. He's funny. I actually really like the scenes with him in it. But my wife was like, oh, you can't take our daughter to see it. She's 8. And, you know, it's going to have this sort of like Jurassic Park level terror in it. And I knew right away, I was like, no, this is not going to have fucking Jurassic Park level terror. Like, but that they could have that. Like, we saw Godzilla -1 this year, and Godzilla is scary as fuck. You know, you don't have to make this a horror movie. Obviously, you want to get kids to come see this. But even in a kid's movie from the 80s that has big monsters or creatures in it, it's still scarier and more tense than this. This is just like, okay, let's get to this set piece. then this. Let's get to this set piece, then this. Like, I want to place a bet. I bet I know which one of the MonsterVerse movies is your favorite. You ready? Can I guess it?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Kong Skull Island.
So what's really funny is after rewatching all of them before we reviewed Monarch, I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed Kong Skull Island on rewatch, and I think it is my favorite of those movies.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it has that when you watch the original King Kong, it's in black and white with the stop motion, and when you watch Godzilla 1985, I think it is. When you watch like some of these horror movies, I mean, I say horror. That's kind of spoiling my point there. It's like there's legit terror and like horrible stuff that happens in these movies. When you watch
there's also rated R level kills in that movie.
Exactly. Like
the one guy who gets like impaled by the spider legs.
Yeah. I always think about that. Yeah, and then you also have the fucking Peter Jackson King Kong, which has this one scene with like Andy Serkis. Oh my god,
that's 100%. And that's a movie. Thank you for reminding me. That is a movie that I've been meaning to go back and revisit because I remember thinking this probably didn't need to be 3 hours, but
you're right.
That movie is excellent.
Yeah,
and it was the first post Hobbit movie for him, or Lord of the Rings movie.
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
So I think a lot of people dismissed it, but that movie was fucking great. And somebody on Twitter, I don't know who it was, but I saw somebody on Twitter say this, and I said, "Oh my god, that would be amazing."
Yeah.
Taking this franchise in a different direction, somebody said, release a found footage movie that is Jack Black's footage from Skull Island.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
And have that be basically, and I'm like, I like found footage movies. I like monsters. Yes. That's a great fucking idea. So if you're the person that tweeted that, good job. You know what's really funny?
Yeah.
You put the villains on the ticker, and then we immediately jumped past them. So you want to talk about the villains in this movie?
Not really. I actually want to talk about something that's really fucking. So we can talk about the villains in 1 second because I got a ticker that says the final battle. I gotta bring up this point, man. Like, this movie's a really dumb movie. There's multiple times where I was in the audience and I was just like this because I couldn't believe how dumb it was. I'm like, they really expect us to eat that. But the worst part is when they're like, oh, Kong has frostbite on his right arm. And they're like, luckily we have this giant mech arm like 20 feet away from us to put on him. Okay, good. That was like too much for me, man.
Do you know what that scene reminded me of? Again, Frozen Empire, where it just so happened that they were like, oh, the bad guy doesn't like copper. I'm going to smelt this fire pole in the time it takes the villain to go 3 city blocks in New York and turn my proton pack into like a copper, shooting alloy weapon. And that would take like a month. It took this like teenage girl like 4 minutes of screen time. And like Dan Stevens is like, oh, I'll be right back.
Right.
And he jumps in and he's like, this is wicked awesome. Look at me. And like, oh my God. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like not only that, but they had the right, thank God he didn't get his left arm.
Right.
Thank God. It's like they knew Kong was a righty. Good. I mean, thank God for that.
Right.
But yeah. I feel like we should, since you want to talk about the final battle, which I missed most of, we should at least talk about the 2 villains. And I want to start this by just saying, I am very good with keeping my phone off in a movie theater. But I turned my phone back on to see the time because I wanted to know how long it was into the movie where we had not met the villains in a team-up movie. It was 55 minutes.
There you go. Of course.
Before we met Scar King.
Of course.
And it baffled me because I feel like this movie suffered from almost like post-Endgame MCU-itis, where the entire point of the MonsterVerse, from like the opening, from like the post credit scenes in Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, are Godzilla's gonna fight Kong. So okay, you did that. Godzilla versus Kong. It was Batman v Superman. They team up to fight Doomsday at the end,
Right.
and Wonder Woman Mothra is there.
Right.
So you're waiting. You get that movie. You get the versus movie, and now it's like, oh, now they're on the same team. Well, who can stand up to these two apex titans? Like, they've made this point for 3 movies that they are 2 apex titans. So basically what you're telling me is there are no villains worthy of fighting them, because
No.
they're so it feels like, to make a wrestling reference now, I'm just
There we
bouncing
go.
all over the place. It's like, so I'm going to WrestleMania next week.
Nice, man.
I'm going to night 2 of WrestleMania with Brandon. That was his birthday present.
Awesome.
Night 1 of WrestleMania is the biggest tag team match of all time, where it's The Rock, the fucking Rock, and Roman Reigns, who has been champion for 4 years, are teaming up against Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. Now, they're the 2 biggest, like, babyface stars, good guys in the WWE right now.
Right,
but to me, this would be the equivalent of if you got The Rock to come back and team with Roman Reigns, and the 2 of them were going to fight, Tito Santana and Rick Martel. And you're like, it like, just so, like, 2 lower level wrestlers, and respect to them. I love those 2 guys. But, like, my point being, like, you're not going to have the 2 biggest characters come back to fight a couple of jobbers. And I felt like that's what Scar King and Shimu were. First of all,
jobbers.
Can we agree that Shimu was awful in principle because he's adorable?
Yeah. Right.
You can't have an adorable villain. And, like, he's like a slave. He comes out, he's got the chain around his neck. He's like, and I'm like, and as soon as I saw that, I went, oh, he's going to freeze Scar King.
That's it. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like, this is all building up to the most obvious conclusion in monster history.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy the one part where, like, Scar King is like, let's go, everybody. And he's riding Shimu with like the army of apes around him, the Kongs around him. I'm like,
and when he's controlling him, it's like he's got the remote control for the TV and he's trying to turn off the volume. He's like, so Danny, you fell asleep during the final battle, you said, or like, you kind of maybe were in and out of consciousness. The final battle was pretty good too. There's a few things that, like, I want to praise about this movie, because I really like when Kong first meets the baby Kong, and, like, the baby Kong and some other apes try to jump him, and he literally takes the baby Kong and, like, swings him and hits him into the other gorillas. I love that. Yeah. There's one thing too, but because we're gonna get close to wrapping this up. But did you watched Andor, right?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, anyway, there's this one Scottish guy in this movie, and he's actually in Andor. I'm like, oh, that Scottish guy from Andor's in this. That's crazy. And he gets eaten by a fucking tree. I was like, that actually kind of reminded me of Kong Skull Island, like that sequence of the guy getting eaten like that. But of course, I knew he was going to die too. With these villains, I mean,
he might as well have had a red shirt on.
Yes, exactly. And he has a Scottish accent like Scotty too, who has a red shirt. But what do you call it? No, you're totally right. Where, like, the marketing and stuff make it like Scar King is this big deal, and he's mean to the other gorillas. Like, you definitely, as far as, like, emotional investment, you definitely feel like, oh, this guy sucks. He's being horrible to these other Kong creatures, but, like, there isn't ever this sense of tension or terror with these monsters, so that, like, you're not worried for King Kong or Godzilla. You're just basically like, okay, here, they're going to be in peril for a minute. Like, one of them's going to damage that arm a little bit, so it looks like King Kong's going to lose. But then, of course, they're going to turn Shimu against him. It's like, everything's going to happen. And so you're just kind of waiting to get to these beats. And I feel like that's the most frustrating part of media, where it's like when you know what's going to happen and it doesn't even feel satisfying. So you're just kind of, can we get to this? I hate that. And that's what I feel like so many of these movies are, you know? So, I mean, the final battle, if you do go back and see it, I recommend if you go to the Draft House, get one of those $8 coffees, those plain $8 coffees. That'll keep you awake for the final battle.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you want to see any more of these movies? Like, do you is there any more they could make with these movies?
So that was a question I was going to ask you, is like, where would you take, because I don't think, because of the story they've told with this whole idea of Titans, with like there being a level of them, it doesn't, and they've already done Ghidorah. So like the idea of Godzilla or Kong fighting a monster of the week, I don't think that is a universe I want to deal with. The only thing that I would love to see, and I was talking about this with my cousin yesterday, is we've now established that there are other Kongs. There's an entire community of Kongs. Why can't there be another Godzilla?
Hell yeah.
And why can't we do fucking mean ass Godzilla -1 in this universe?
Yeah.
Why can't we do a movie that starts with some type of, and here's how you get the humans out of here. Make it some type of like human war, a nuclear weapon is used, and that wakes up a second Godzilla.
Yeah.
Like they keep talking about how like only this percentage of Hollow Earth has been mapped out. Well, we always talk about how only like 4% of the ocean has been touched.
Boom.
Have it be like almost in the Meg universe, where they set off an atomic bomb or something, and it triggers like an underwater earthquake, and Godzilla from Godzilla -1 shows up, and like maybe that Godzilla kills this Godzilla and fights
God.
Kong. Like I want it to go fucking crazy. Like I want it, because there's nothing interesting like Shimu, and like even the scenes where Godzilla. I also love that humanity is just like, we'll let Godzilla hang around on Earth. I mean, when he wakes up and goes for a small walk and kills 4,000 people and destroys priceless landmarks, it's fine. He's a protector. Like, is he?
Right.
Like,
just
like, do something. Like, Godzilla versus the giant crab isn't interesting anymore. King Kong versus like an army of like roving like annihilation bears isn't interesting anymore. But like I will say that first 10 minutes when Kong rips that thing in half and like showers himself in the ball, I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
No humans. Like give me that, like give me Kong like taking like a slow like shower in a waterfall, being like, I'm too old for this shit. Like it was great. Like I loved that part of it. And like the effects look great. Like again, I'm more just upset with how much I don't like this universe than I am actually shitting on this movie. But like the human involvement always drags it down for me.
Right.
And I feel like I want to see something where it's, less humans, more monsters, but like doesn't have to be 2 hours of straight monster fighting. Like I'm interested in like the biodiversity of Hollow Earth and like that. But yeah, if they could somehow bring in another Godzilla, that would be really fun. Like,
fuck yeah, dude! I always love.
I feel like they've done Ghidorah, they've done Mechagodzilla already.
Yeah.
So it's like, where is there a beloved show of villain monster that like we need to see again? Like especially when we've established that like Godzilla and Kong can team up now at any time. Like, I don't know.
I mean, there's a couple other ones that I always see pictures of, but I don't know the name of. And I always think of that one smog monster that, like,
Hidora, yeah.
when it flew over the crowd of people, it turned them all to skeletons. Like, that was scary, and you could do something like that. And he could be like the creation of humanity, because the Titans in this protect humanity. They protect the Earth. And it's like, well, what if the humans made something that could fuck up the Earth? I don't know. I mean, but I actually got to get going because it is Easter here today.
Yes.
But it was actually a pleasure talking with you about this. I think we both are in agreement that this is kind of like a 70, 75 kind of movie. We got stuff coming up on the Lastercast. You want to tell people real quick, Danny, what they can find on our channel?
I have a short about this movie. I have a short about Immaculate, and I forgot what the other one is. But I've seen a bunch of horror movies lately. Next weekend is what is it? The First Omen comes out next week.
We'll watch that. Yeah.
Before I go to WrestleMania, I'm gonna try to see that either Thursday or Friday. Cannot wait for that. Super excited. If you follow our channel, you know my feelings on the original Omen. So I can't wait for that. Also, I don't know if it's really gonna fall into horror, but I can't wait for Monkey Man with Dev Patel.
I mean, if this movie can fall into horror, I think we can make it stretch and fit.
Yeah, I'll probably do like a short about that. But yeah, I have a bunch of shorts. Also, if you like horror trivia, I did about a 15-minute just conversation piece about why I love playing horror trivia. So you can check that out. Yeah.
Nice, man. And so luckily you were able to sneak in for Jesus' Day, Easter. You got a reference to the Devil's Son too for Omens. That's perfect. Yeah, there you go. He's doing the devil horns, everybody. We will see you guys